Hello and welcome. This is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. In this video, we're going to cover the Ethical Hacking version 2 lab series. This is for Lab 18, Social Engineering Attacks with Social Engineering Toolkit. So this is a open source tool primarily used for reconnaissance purposes, mainly for spear phishing and website attack vectors. So in this lab, we're essentially going to look at crafting what looks like a Google or Gmail login page. And we're going to be waiting on the other end as the attacker for a victim to visit that link and enter in their credentials, thinking that they are accessing their Gmail, for example. So this would be considered credential harvesting. Okay. Now I went ahead and already logged in to the Kali machine and the OpenSUSE machine. The passwords for those, remember, you can always find those on the lab. On this one, it's page 5. So you have the passwords there. Root Tor for the Kali box, and for OpenSUSE, it's osboxes and osboxes.org for the password. So fairly simple topology. We are using Social Engineering Toolkit on the Kali machine, and then we're going to essentially open up that link on the OpenSUSE machine. You can think of it as we spearfish the user here. They decide to click a link, maybe in their email, and then that's going to take them to the malicious login. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. On the Kali machine, go here, and we type in SE Toolkit to go ahead and launch Social Engineering Toolkit. Now you're prompted with basically a license agreement. And the most important part here is in red. The Social Engineering Toolkit is designed purely for good and not evil. If you are planning on using this tool for malicious purposes that are not authorized by the company you are performing assessments for, you are violating the terms of service and license of this tool set. So always important to remember, we're here to be ethical hackers. And this is why we use this in a sandbox environment, so that you cannot actually use this, in the outside world. Definitely don't want to do this, even to your friends and family. Not cool. You can get in trouble. So be careful with this. But of course, this is all part of the learning process. So, and in general, if you use this tool in the future, if you end up getting a job as a penetration tester, for example, remember you always need written permission to do any kind of social engineering attacks like this. Okay, so all of these errors are kind of interesting. Looks like it's having trouble pulling some Python libraries. Hopefully that won't be an issue. But you can see here we're greeted with a cool ASCII art, which is always my favorite. And here we have the menu of our options. So social engineering attacks, penetration testing, third-party modules, etc. We're going to be looking at number 1, social engineering attacks. And now this gives us a refresh, a new menu. And I would recommend doing your lab at home like this as well. You have the lab on one side, the walkthrough on the other, as you kind of start to get the hang of doing these. Kind of a bonus is if you do the lab a couple times, try rerunning it without the walkthrough. That way you can kind of test your own knowledge and assess yourself to see if the tools are really starting to sink in. So from here, we have various options: spear phishing attack vectors, website attack vectors, infectious media generator, create a payload and listener, mass mailer attack. In this case, we are going to do website attack vectors. So remember, we're going to essentially have a fake login page. And I mentioned in the intro to the lab, we're essentially looking to do credential harvesting. We want to be waiting on the other end for people to visit this site that we create, and then we're gonna grab their login, their username and passwords. So we're gonna choose number 3. And now we have 3 different options here. We're going to choose web templates. There is a site cloner option where you can also clone a site that's out there. And there's also custom import. So you could potentially get really creative. Let's say if you've done the early on reconnaissance on your target, you know that they use a very specific and maybe niche social media site. You could, if you're good with HTML and design, you could create your own customized phishing page for that and then import that into SE Toolkit. But for now, we're going to use a built-in template. So I'll choose 1. Now, super important, enter the IP address for postback in Harvester tab nabbing. So this needs to be the IP of our Kali machine, because remember, this is the information, whoever, whether it's this machine or another machine out there, and this is what a lot of phishers do. They create this one malicious landing page and they send spam phishing emails, and whoever clicks it, you'll see once we get towards the end of this lab, you'll see how it just harvests all those credentials. So we need to tell the website where to send it back to. So we need to choose we're on the 192.168.9 network, and the host for Kali is the .2. So that's why you see here in the lab, we set this to 192.168.9.2. That is the IP address of our Kali machine or attacker machine. And for template, in this case, we're going to choose Google. Okay. Cloning the website, google.com. And it looks like it's currently running. So it's ready to go. So while it's waiting, so this part of the lab, it's kind of interesting that they put this in here. I think it's good practice. This editing this set.config file, this is actually only related if you run the site cloner, to where you're kind of like spoofing the domain and you want to set an auto redirect to your IP. But let's go ahead and do that. I'll go up to File. I'll say New Tab. So this is a good practice too. In Terminal, you can have multiple tabs. I try not to have the same bad tab practice as I do in my web browsers. But yeah, so we have a new tab open here. And so Nano, to explain what's happening with this command here, Nano is a text editor. And right now we are giving it what's called an absolute path in Linux. So whenever a path begins with this /, it's what's called an absolute path. So you're moving to a completely different area on the file system. And that's going to be the folder etc. Some people call it etc. etc /se toolkit / and now we're designating a file. This is the file that we're going to pull up in the Nano editor, and that comes up. So here you can you could scroll with your mouse, or you could page up, page down to navigate through here. And we're looking for the area called Harvester redirect. And I believe there it is. Okay, so I had to page down a handful of times. So let's pretend that we are doing a site cloner. This is, like I said, it's good practice. We're gonna turn that on, and then we have to change this to our Kali IP. This is very common practice when you build either payloads or exploits. You often have to make some quick edits to configuration files, or so you have to make sure that you're setting the postback. When we get into things like Metasploit, you'll see where you set up, when you choose a particular exploit module, you have to set what's called an L host. That would be the listener. An R host would be the victim, for example. So it's important to make note, and that's why the topology will be your friend. You need to know the IPs of the systems that you're working with. Okay, so that takes care of step 2. Like I said, not super related to the other part that we were doing, but it is good practice, and I hope I added good context for that. So at this point, remember, we are still waiting and listening. Let's pretend we just finished our phishing email and we sent it out. And we log into our OpenSUSE machine, and we will open up a web browser. So you can find that, you click the green kickoff application launcher down here under favorites, you'll find web browser. There's a Firefox installation. And now in this case, we're just going to go directly to the IP address of our Kali machine. Obviously, the phishing attempt would have to be clever and get you to click on this, make you think that it's something else, for example. But ultimately, this is where the phishing link would take you, right? So if you're not paying attention, you may not notice that this changed to this like very suspicious looking IP address. There's some other obvious issues. It's missing a logo, for example. And like I said, with that that import option, you can potentially fix these kind of issues. But you know that not all people would even really notice that. They just like, oh, I just want to get logged in, right? So let's do test at test.com and super secure password. I'll even add a $. So that's a really long, complex password, right? It meets NIST password requirements, but that gets thrown out the window if you are susceptible to a phishing scam. So let's go back to the Kali machine. And we see we got a hit. Okay. So as immediately as and you notice that all it did was just kind of refresh the page. It didn't give any error. So somebody might say, who knows, maybe I'll try logging in again, and they'll get it again. So no matter how many times you try, you're going to keep triggering this. So you see right away, here is my super secure password, my email. So there you go. So now that we've finished harvesting those credentials, let's go ahead, and you'll see here when you're finished, hit Control-C to generate a report. So Control-C, you'll see 99 to return to main menu. We're going to do that a few times to completely exit. Okay, very good. And now we are going to move into this folder. So our reports folder here. Now CD in Linux, this stands for change directory. So we're changing directory into an absolute path, which is /root.set, which a dot or period in front of a file or folder in Linux means that it's hidden. And reports finally. So it's a reports folder. Now, if we do ls, we notice that we have this XML file here. And you notice that the command is saying, it's saying run cat, type out the rest of the file name .xml. And we can see that it's a long file name. So I'll give you a good tip. And you can see that it's auto-generated based on the time that you are running this. So that's why they didn't give you the exact file name. And I make sure you don't copy exactly what's in their photo as well, because this depends on when you run this. So cat is short for concatenate, and basically all it's going to do is take the contents of a file and print them out onto the terminal window. So the tip that I was talking about, we can actually start typing this out 2021 and press the tab key. And you notice that it also fills in these backslashes. These are related to formatting, and because you notice there's some spaces, and also the colons. This is basically telling Linux like this is actually part of a command and does not mean something else. I'm not trying to do any kind of what's called regular expression or more advanced command. This is a file name that I want to concatenate. So like I said, as long as you start typing out 2021, press the tab key. This is a tip that will help you all throughout your Linux days. It will autocomplete a file or folder, assuming that there is no other file that could possibly be what you're typing, right? So it's context based. So when I press enter, like I said, it takes that file and just prints it right on out to the terminal. So this is another case where, okay, we see our results of our credential harvesting. And that is all. That is the end of the lab. So essentially, remember what we did. We loaded Social Engineering Toolkit. We created a malicious landing page. We kind of spoofed a Gmail login page. And if you kind of use your imagination, pretend that we sent that out as a phishing email, and the user of the OpenSUSE machine opened that, they visited the link, that took them to the landing page that is going to send back or post back these credentials to our Kali machine. And that's what we saw here. So great, that is it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.